please.
Okay. Good afternoon. I would like to take a brief moment to thank you for the opportunity to present my project here today. And I would also like to acknowledge my co-investigators on this project, Professor Tanzan Ben and Sarah Al-Khalid, who contributed enormously to this work that I'm talking about. So following the successful bid of the Men's FIFA 2022 World Cup, the first ever Qatari national women's football team was established, and alongside it, a national level competition for Qatari women. And it is the experiences of the women in the first ever national football team that I would like to share with you here today. You will note that what I provide here is a condensed version of the project, with small extracts from interview data due to time constraints. For those of you who are interested in reading more, I have copies of the research paper here that you can collect after the presentation. So to provide you with some background information, Qatar is a small country on the Arabian Peninsula, sharing its only land border with Saudi Arabia. Ruled by an absolute monarchy, both the head of state's father, affectionately known as the Father Emir, and his second wife, Sheikha Moza, are credited with facilitating the rapid change and transformation of Qatar over the past 15 years. The current Emir, Sheikh Tamim, came into power in 2013 after his father's planned and strategic abdication, and he continues the work initiated by his mother and father. This research was conducted during a period of rapid change and modernisation in Qatar, as evidenced through this photo of Doha, and it is this rapid change that is something I ask you to remember throughout the presentation. So in tangible terms, this incredibly fast development includes the seemingly overnight establishment of innovatively designed skyscrapers that form Doha's central business district. The construction of vast modern highway systems, lavish shopping malls, museums, housing and cultural precincts. An increase in the very nice cars that drive on these highways that lead to the shopping malls and cultural precincts. The near completion of Qatar Foundation, which houses Education City, accommodating a number of international university campuses, Sidra Medical and Research Centre, and Qatar Science and Technology Park. Less tangible, but equally significant changes have been evident for Qatari women, including the introduction of a law governing the permissibility of women to drive in the year 2000. Qatari women have also experienced a very real increase in access to tertiary education, and currently more Qatari women are graduating from university than Qatari men. However, amidst this change and development remains a highly structured and conservative society, maintained partially through the power and preservation of organising tribal systems. Qatar is a tribal society. Your family name will determine both your access and success in fields such as business, social groups, family, housing, politics, and your participation in sport. And this is coupled with prevailing customs that are deeply rooted in Islamic heritage. Of course, this is all a rather sanitised version and description of Qatar, which is very much a country in transition, where women continue to negotiate patriarchal structures. And there are continuing issues surrounding both workers' rights and abuse, and the kafala or sponsorship system, which all expatriates in Qatar live and work under. And it is these last 2 points that have gained prominent media attention in recent years, in light of the successful FIFA 2022 World Cup bid. Many in Qatar and internationally argue that the FIFA World Cup will work to resolve some of these prevailing issues. Now, the FIFA World Cup has also drawn attention to women's sporting participation in Qatar. Globally, we know that Muslim women have had a long and rich history of participation in sport, both at a local level and an international level. The issue of Islam women and sport participation has been examined by several researchers, including Islamic feminists, who have been engaged in a reinterpretation of authentic Islamic texts from a female perspective. Now, their consensus is that nothing in Islam prohibits girls' and women's participation in sport, provided that they are modest in dress. However, definitions of modest dress, the complexities of religion, cultural and political overlays, and the different ways in which individuals show their faith in public all influence diverse realities for Muslim women in sport around the world. The reality is that there are multiple ways in which Muslim women can and do interpret and negotiate religious and cultural boundaries regarding sporting participation. For example of this diversity, we can look to the Olympians of Morocco, to the enforced hijab-wearing footballers of Iran, and contrast this to the banning of the hijab in high-level sport in Turkey. When considering women's sport in Qatar, the London 2012 Olympics were significant for Qatari women, with this being the first year that a female delegation competed at the Games. And when you start to understand the rapid change Qatari women have experienced and facilitated themselves, for example, being able to drive cars in the year 2000 onwards, full access to higher education and the workplace, it's not surprising perhaps that Qatari women have been slow to perform on the international sporting stage. In other words, and understandably I think, sport has not been a big priority for many. They've had other fights to fight for. Understanding Qatari women's participation in sport is challenging due to the lack of research that focuses solely on the Qatari population. Yes, Qatari women are Muslim, but so are some people from Algeria, Sweden, Bosnia, Australia, Lebanon, Indonesia, India, etc. And even within the GCC, women's experiences within sport are incredibly diverse. Al Ansari from Bahrain has over 25 years' experience in sport leadership within her country, and she's written about the pioneering women who have helped establish opportunities for Bahraini girls and women in physical education and high-performance sport. Now, this is in contrast to Al Sanani, from Oman, who describes Islamic and cultural influences on Omani's girls' and women's participation in sport. Al Sanani highlights that national and international competition for Omani women remains problematic because of the public visibility of their bodies. And in a similar vein to Oman, discussions of women's participation in sport cannot be removed from the way women's bodies are positioned within local culture. For example, traditional Qatari culture reinforces the practice of gender segregation through both the regulation of space and the covering of female bodies, as you can see here. But I think this cartoon is a nice reminder, and for those of you who can't read, the woman in the bikini is thinking everything covered but her eyes, what a cruel male-dominated culture. And the woman in the full black abaya is thinking nothing covered but her eyes, what a cruel male-dominated culture. So for our project, we were interested in the idea of how or if World Cup football can bring positive change to the host country. And in Qatar's case, how World Cup football could increase participation amongst Qatari women. To do this, we worked with members of Qatar's first ever national women's football team to understand their lived experiences. We partnered up with Sarah Al-Khalid, a Qatari woman who became our co-researcher. Sarah conducted the interviews in Qatari Arabic dialect and translated the interviews back into English. She was also involved in the data analysis. And of course, we worked hard to make sure that we had the right approvals from various departments and leaders within the Qatari community. So what did the participants have to say? The women in this study discussed how they resolved the combining of religious and sporting identities by wearing modest clothing. And Sarah asks, we're in a conservative society, and as a Qatari girls wearing hijab, do you feel we can play sport and respect our religion, customs and traditions? And I can see my formatting's gone wrong. This was done on a Mac, sorry. And Noura says, yes, of course. If she loves the game, she can play football and respect her religion and customs and traditions. At the end, we are Muslims, and we shall respect our religion. That is what we are doing now. We are wearing conservative clothing when we are playing. Importantly, all of the young women in this study identified Islam as being supportive of Muslim women's participation in sport, on the condition that modest dress was adopted. But within the wider community, there were contradictions. Al Johora says, honestly, I know a lot of people with a negative point of view about girls playing sport. They don't accept it. And Sarah asks, this rejection, is it from a cultural perspective or is it because of Islam? And Al Johora says customs and traditions, and half of the community say it's not allowed in Islam. Now, more challenging to the participants was the negotiation of media interests. So whilst Qatari women enjoy full participation in public life, deep attitudes still prevail regarding women's appearance within the media. Whilst photography is becoming more acceptable, for example in newspapers or on advertising billboards, recordings that capture movement of the body remain taboo. For example, women playing football. One of the participants says, and a lot of families refuse girls and women playing because football is a famous sport and matches will sometimes be aired on TV. Reem says, the parents didn't refuse the idea of me playing football with the national team. They refused the idea that I would be photographed for newspapers or be on TV. They encouraged me to play as long as it was not too serious. So although the media was identified as something that required careful negotiation, it was not always portrayed as a problem by the young women playing in the national team. The media was identified as a facilitator for community acceptance through the normalisation of participation and showing other girls what is possible, that is, through acting as role models of sorts. The young women were able to challenge cultural boundaries without disrupting religious norms, and they regarded this as a way of persuading the wider Qatari community that it was possible to be a good Qatari woman and a sportswoman, that is, as long as modest dress was included while participating. Now, patriarchy runs deep within Qatari society, reinforced through a complex tribal system spanning thousands of years. Within this system, strong gender roles are assigned to both men and women, with men typically holding the position of authority in both the family and the wider community. Such patriarchal values are disrupted when Qatari women move into the field of sport, particularly football, which is a space that is seen globally, not just within Qatar, and historically as a place invented by, reserved for, and maintained by men. It is important to note, of course, that football is a space that women in all countries have had difficulty breaking into. The following quote demonstrates not only patriarchal attitudes, but importantly, some contradictions within these. People rejected the idea of girls playing football. The majority refused and rejected the idea of girls playing sport, but especially football. I faced negative people, but I didn't care as long as my parents and uncles were supporting me. It was my aunts who refused the idea of me playing, as it created a bad reputation for girls. But I told her that playing football was a hobby. Another participant spoke of her grandmother convincing other families to let her play, and a third participant spoke about how her brothers advocated for her. So, while systems and social structures within Qatar are patriarchal in nature, it's evident from the talk of the young women presented so far that gendered attitudes towards women's participation in sport are not static or fixed. Challenges to negative attitudes came from within, from the young women themselves through the support of significant others who consisted of both male and female and spanned it across 3 generations. It is important to highlight the importance of powerful, significant others that allowed the existence of the team to be possible. Tight support networks have, as we have seen, through supportive families across both genders and across 3 generations. The state sanctioning of the team, the very fact that the team existed, is evidence of support from the royal family. Powerful, influential Qatari women were also key to facilitating the existence and the ongoing development of the team, including the president of the Women's Sports Committee. The women also spoke of school, and in particular their physical education teachers, as being influential. And this is supported by research by Al-Sinani, who highlights the strength of girls' physical education in Qatar in comparison to neighbouring countries. Combined, we suggest that this support across multiple levels of society has ensured the young women were not viewed as dissidents. This enabled the participants to slowly change the way gender is performed, what gender can look like, without being viewed as a threat to Qatari society. So in conclusion, This research indicated that the women's agency, support mechanisms and strategies enabled them to negotiate where necessary their membership in Qatar's national first women's football team. There were no patterns of consensus regarding stereotypes of male domination. There was a complex interplay between culture and gendered complexities, and these required individual negotiations. There was no one-size-fits-all. All of the young women in this study had a deep, profound respect for Islam. But they were also balancing between challenging cultural norms whilst maintaining their Qatari identities. The Qatari women who participated in this study have built on the breakthroughs of all women globally who have challenged inequality in sport, and they're to be commended for creating and sustaining new spaces for the aspiration of future Qatari women and girls. They have become a part of Qatar's history, and in that sense, I argue that winning the bid to host the Men's World Cup in 2022 has already been a catalyst for change. Thank you.